Hello, and welcome to the Yoga Teachers Hustle. My name is Anna, and I have been teaching for 9 years, and I've been practicing yoga for 20. This podcast is basically going to be me talking about all the different experiences I've had during teaching my yoga teaching career. Now, this is not going to make you millions. It's not going to show you the winning formula, that's for sure. But there's a lot of things that you start to encounter when you begin to teach yoga that you're just not taught during your basic teacher training. So although, you will learn about your yogic philosophies and you'll learn about positioning and transitioning, there are certain business aspects that just aren't sort of touched on. And these aspects are things that come at you quite by surprise, and then you end up sort of being quite discombobulated and not sure what to do. So these are things like GDPR, or you want to hire a room and you're asked about a risk assessment. Things that you weren't sure you needed to know, but are essential when you're dealing with customers and clients. But today we're actually going to be talking about equipment. Because like most people, when you first start out in yoga, unless you've got a full-time job that brings in a good wage and you have extra income, spare income to be able to buy lots of yoga equipment, the chances are that you're going to be limited as to what you can purchase and what is available to you. I'm going to start with a conversation about your mat or the mats of your student. I actually was at the gym a couple of days ago doing a fitness workout. I do yoga, but I also do fitness as well. And I stepped off the mat. I had my things on the mat, wiped it clean, ready to go, and had my phone and things on the mat. But I'd stepped off it to steady myself to do a particular squat so that my trainers didn't damage the mats. And as I stepped off it, somebody from the other side of the gym walked across the gym to the other side of the room and walked over the top of my mat. Now, I've always taught my students that it's bad etiquette to walk on someone else's mat, purely because, firstly, it's unhygienic. And secondly, whenever you put your mat down anywhere and then you step on it, it takes you psychologically and emotionally to a place of healing. It's a sanctuary that you can create for yourself. That little mat island that you create for yourself is your safe haven, your safe bubble. And really, I do believe that students, when they attend classes, should be encouraged to either avoid other people's mats or kind of ask permission to be on them or join someone on a mat, just purely for that energetic part of that mat and what it represents. However, during this trip to the gym, I did have to stop myself and just be non-judgmental about this. I really did have to have a word with myself, purely because I'm disciplined not to walk on someone else's mat, and that's what I've always tried to encourage with my students, doesn't mean this individual has the same mentality towards that. She was just a normal individual in the gym, and she needed to get to the other side, and she went by the route that she thought was quickest. So I think if you want a particular behaviour towards equipment in your classroom, it's something that you do need to share and not expect other people to understand from the word go. But I never had more than 3 mats when I first started teaching. I had my own mat and I had 2 spares, which had been donated. And my own mat was not a particularly great mat. I was very fortunate to be given a really lovely rubber mat for my birthday from my sister. But before that, I ended up with the general sort of foam mats that you have. So to be honest, when I learnt my yoga, I actually did it on the floor, on most of my learning on carpet. When I initially, years and years ago, 20 years ago, I did everything on a carpet. So I was initially self-taught until I actually did join classes later on down the line. So I've never really been that worried about having the best mat until I started teaching. But if people do want to attend your classes, the best thing to say to them is that I may have a couple of spare, or I may have 1 spare, but you do need to bring your own if you have them. You will find if people are just trialing the class for the first time and don't know whether they're going to join yoga in the long term, they may just want to borrow a mat because they're not going to invest that money unless they really enjoy the class. But of course they're going to return and buy their own mat because you're fantastic. So that's obviously a winner, isn't it? But I wouldn't burden yourself with too many mats. There is a reason for this as well, because when you're coming in and out of venue, there's going to be a short time of which you can set up and pack away. I think this is something we'll cover in another podcast, actually, about times used within the hiring space, because this is quite an interesting topic in itself. But you don't want to be walking in with, if you've got 8 students that are attending, 8 to 10 students, and you're going to give them 2 blocks each, and they're going to have a mat each, and you're going to supply all of that. Then you've got to carry that in, you've got to take it back out, you've got to transport it there. Whereas if a student is encouraged to have their own equipment and bring their own equipment, then they pack it away and they get it out, and it's less hassle for yourself and it takes up less time. So that's just something to consider with timings when you're in the classroom. I would always take with me, I did actually manage to purchase 8 blocks. And I like to have them because I think they're great for sitting properly when you're making sure the pelvis is in the correct position. And it meant if I had 8 blocks that most people I could hand 1 to, and they could sit on it or they could use it. And those that were in particular positions where they needed to reach the floor but they weren't flexible enough, they could use it as a prop, or in a forward bend they could use and they couldn't touch the floor, they could use the block. But generally I do tend to try and encourage people to use their own blocks and buy their own equipment. Also, if you are somebody that works with affiliate programs, so you might want to contact yoga brands and speak about talking on commission base, so that if you sell one of their, I recommend, and someone buys that piece of equipment from them on your recommendation, that perhaps you get a commission based or something in conjunction with them. So that's all something to consider later on down the line. But when I was teaching on Zoom during COVID, and that's another class that we can attach to in another podcast, I think, but when I was teaching online during COVID, I realised I had a lot more students coming to me that didn't have equipment and were doing it on their carpet, like how I learned. And I realised very quickly that I was going to have to adapt to what I was teaching with regards to using equipment. And because you can't really see people quite so well on the screen, and because you're probably giving more verbal cues, because you can't really see them all that well, things are going to be done with an air on the air of safety and caution to make sure people are doing things safely. But there were a couple of things that I always asked people to bring, and they were a very, very tightly rolled up big bath mat, because a big rolled up bath mat can do a number of things. It can help put underneath your knees when you're going to forward bend to stop yourself from having the problems of the stretch and just releasing a bit of tension there. They're also really fantastic if they're rolled up very tightly to use as a bolster to sit your bottom on, so that your hips can sink in that right position. They're also good if you want to actually unroll them and put them on the mat for some extra padding, or if you're somebody that's a little bit cautious about hygiene, you could use it to rub the mat down with. The second thing I asked people to bring was a belt, or a long piece of ribbon that they could tie a knot in the end, or a loop in at the end, so that it could be used as a yoga strap. So if people couldn't touch their toes, or there was a move which involved something using a yoga strap, they could wrap that around and use it, or use the belt with a buckle in a loop. And that really is effective. If you don't have a yoga strap but you want to practice, or you have students that don't have yoga straps, there is so many ways you can work around that. And also, the other thing I asked them to do was a book, and not quite a tall book, not necessarily to sit on, but actually to more of as a prop. So if, like I said before, you were moving into a forward fold and you couldn't touch the ground, you could prop the book up on its tall end and you could pop your hands on it, and it's just a little bit of balance for that person. So that was a bath towel, a mat, and a book. A bath towel, a belt, and a book. So they're things that are really easily obtainable. Also, you'll also see in the picture that I provided that there's a tin of Aldi's peaches. But you're thinking, what's the tin of peaches there for? But the tin of peaches there is a really great tool to help people strengthen their wrists. There's really some lovely exercises. And in fact, if you stay on to the end of the podcast, I can add a link to the next video of how to actually use a tin can to help strengthen the wrist. So very quick, very, very quick video for you to do, but something for you to consider. So if you're just starting out and you're starting to have a panic about people not having equipment and they're coming to your classes, I would say that you do need to encourage people to either borrow someone else's mat for their first class if they're not sure, and then if they do want to come back, that they do purchase their own one, even if it's only a £9.99. I think I'm talking about £9.99, but I whatever that would be equivalent would be in dollars. And just have just 2 or 3 blocks that you can hand out for those people that really are struggling. And if everybody's struggling and you don't have a block for everybody, change the move. And then you can almost encourage people to buy blocks themselves. I mean, I know there's much better quality ones that you're spending sort of £15 to £20 on, but a very cheap one, and I'm really against being non-eco-friendly, to be honest, but when you're starting out, you may only be spending £3 or £4 on a block. So it's not a massive expense for an individual. It's just when you accumulate your stock, that could be a big expense for you. You know, if you're opening a yoga studio, if you've opened a yoga studio, you'll realise just how much time and effort it takes and money to sort of acquire these items. But if you're going around to people's houses or you're doing things on Zoom, do encourage people to have a rolled up mat, a tin can, and a cushion and a book. So these are just things for you to consider. Oh, and a belt, forget belt. So best of luck with your classes and your training. And it's been lovely talking with you all, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Stay on and find the video at the end for the wrist strengtheners with the Alditin peaches. And we will see you next time. Take care.